Today we have a quite a rich agenda, and we'll start with Ivan. Ivan is from PwC. Ivan has I would say, a long. He's very experienced in supply chain consulting for any kind of companies of all sizes, and he's been involved and committed to the demand-driven movement for several years now. Ivan will talk about the new normal. Is that correct, Ivan?
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Bernard.
So I will let you introduce the topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bernard, and the tech team in general, for the opportunity of being today, although not in person. So I hope we will be meeting in person at next year's event. So for the time being, we need to survive with this strange situation, and that's also the topic of today. So I would like to present you some of the perspectives we put together on the situation, and more than what is happening, what is about to happen, and why in the say surviving with the COVID and in the post-COVID era. Demand-driven planning methodology can be a great help to get success in supply chain planning in this new strange world we will be living in. As Bernard was saying, I lead the PwC's DDMRP practice at global level. This is a responsibility I took several years ago, and we have created a group of consultants that worldwide are able to deliver demand-driven planning implementation. I also lead operations for core operations for PwC in Italy, and together with me there is Marianna Falcone. She's a senior manager in my team. She has been crucial for the early development of our value proposition around demand-driven planning. She also managed the first DDMRP implementations, and she will be joining us for the Q&A session at the end of this session. So, as I said, this session will be around this new normal. We have called it newer normal. So we believe the new normal was already running even before this COVID outbreak started, and what we are presented with now is an even newer normal to survive with. So let's put this into some context. The outbreak has affected the entire globe. As of now, we have 120 million confirmed cases worldwide. Those are the recent figures, with unfortunately 2.6 million deaths, and those are only the ones that were reported. So I think that those figures may be also an underestimation of what is happening, and all the countries have basically experienced such a disaster. Okay, as a result of that, growth factor of basically all the countries declined, and this also originated a series of consequences affecting global value chains, both in terms of economics and the occupation problems, and not only in general. I think we are all familiar with these situations. I won't go in details there. More in general, we have had and we have seen impact on suppliers. So we put together as a service for several clients like situation rooms to understand which portion of the value chains were still able to respond to demand, and as you can imagine, this situation caused economic troubles to many partners in the value chains. And more in general, whenever you had a lack of resilience and flexibility in your value chains, so no alternative suppliers, no flexibility embedded in the production side, no visibility on what is going to happen, no capacity of simulating what could be the best set of response you can put in place. So anytime you have this kind of aspect, you have an impact on business. And even if this impact on business is important in normal days, this is even more important these days. One thing that we believe that qualitatively is a good point is that whenever you have a crisis, everybody is affected. But what makes the difference is the amount of the impact you can have, and you can see this in this chart in the bottom right. So is the amount of the impact and let's call it the recovery time. So a time where you are able to absorb the effect of the crisis and reconfigure your value chain. Whenever you have a robust supply chain and you invest in resilience and flexibility, you are able to limit the impact and recover faster. And those are the resilience gaps that you can have. And in a competitive business, this is an important asset. How do you protect yourself against this? Of course, there is the capability of being more reactive, okay? So that's how to respond to the crisis. This is a matter of rapidity. So able to search for alternative sources of supply or to change your production rates, okay? This is the only thing you can do in the short term. But if you think about what can happen in the longer term and what can give you, I would say, more chances to succeed in the future is to invest in a future-proof value chain, investing in resiliency. So resiliency is for sure something either you have invested already at the beginning or you need to put as a target for a longer term scenario, okay? At the end of this presentation, I will be presenting you with a case of a client where we have implemented the DDMRP well before COVID outbreak, and with some sort of lessons learned on how they have responded to the crisis. So I think this is important because they have started already in anticipation of the crisis, investing in flexibility through a flow-based supply chain planning process. And this helped them to limit the effect of the COVID crisis. Now, let's not anticipate too much. Why this resilience is important in this, we call it VUCA plus world. I think you are all familiar with what VUCA is. For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, I believe not much. VUCA is the concurrent existence of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So today's value chains are characterized by a VUCA environment, and this was known even before the COVID crisis. If you look at the challenges of, let's say, supply chains for let's say the pre-COVID new normal, and I think everybody's familiar with this chart, which is taken directly from the DDMRP book. You see supply chain complexity, which grew starting from 1965, that we have considered the start of, let's say, the traditional MRP widespread adoption. Okay, that's the beginning era of massive application of MRP, and in this chart you have this compared with the supply chain characteristics of these days. Let's say the pre-COVID. We think that in the newer normal post-COVID, you will be having even higher supply chain complexity, and forecast accuracy will become even lower, and the pressure for leaner inventory will be increasing, further increase with respect to an already high pressure for leaner inventories. Forecast accuracy is a good is a good topic to start with. It's I think one of the reasons why the DDMRP got traction in the market at the beginning is the, let's say, relatively less dependence from forecasts with respect to traditional MRP, even if we all know that forecasts are important also in a demand-driven planning approach. The important thing is that today's what our clients are experiencing are inaccuracies in forecasts, not necessarily on volume, but on channel mix, because this type of crisis originated a different consumption of our products. I mean, the channels through which our products are consumed have moved with respect to the previous situation. Dramatic growth in the online business, and this change is here to stay. Nobody knows exactly what will be the future in this respect, but it's even more difficult to derive channel mix forecasts for the future, because nobody knows exactly where we will be going. So it's even more important to have a reactive and a responsive value chain behind. Of course, resilience is important because value chains today are complex and adaptive systems, and I think that this is another concept which is recognized by the audience of today's session. So we have supply chains that are non-linear and extremely sensible, that when you have something that changes even by a small amount causes a big reaction. And in order to be resilient, you need to follow an adaptation cycle, having a constant measurement of triggers that generates deviations from a known pattern, a feedback cycle where you have adapted agents that monitor what is happening in the market, and a decision in response to those signals to reconfigure your value chain. And the value chain behind needs to be resilient, so able not necessarily to maintain the same state, but able to reconfigure themselves into a new state, which is every time oriented to get a better effectiveness for the new conditions. So I think this is pretty much not only the DDMRP approach, but more in general the demand-driven adaptive enterprise approach, where you have the tactical planning process, the operational planning, and the scheduling processes all together combined in a unique framework. So let's look at what happened in the past with respect to crisis response. This chart was taken by a publication that PwC put together, reanalyzing what have happened into the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So as you see in the left portion of this chart, you have the revenue with the same index put at 100 at the beginning, at the pre-crisis, pre-financial crisis year, 2007. And you have tracked the evolution, so that, as you can see, leader have scored better than average player and laggards in the long run. So this is the classification of leader with respect to average and laggards. And leaders have also managed to perform better in terms of EBITDA margin percentage. So I think this is clear what the leaders did in terms of results, but how did they get there? So that's the interesting piece. We have analyzed some of the traditional supply chain KPIs with respect to the evolution across the financial crisis. And we saw that leaders managed to decrease the response time and increase manufacturing flexibility. And this is what is reported in the upper left portion of the graph. So everybody went in this direction, but leaders did better in this respect. So investing in manufacturing flexibility. This allowed them to decrease order fulfillment lead time, so being more responsive. And they managed to maintain a good on-time delivery. Even across crisis with a small decline in terms of OTD performance, they managed to be quite stable. As a result of that, and you can see that in the chart in the bottom right, you have this concept of a negative impact directly after the crisis, and then a faster recovery. What you can see from this qualitative chart is that by investing in flexibility, responsiveness, and more in general resilience, leaders manage to do better, not only in terms of financial, but also, how can I say, attracting a higher amount of the market shift with respect to average players. So I think this is a very good lesson to be learned. And an additional research that was done on the same data set also showed what was the time to reconfigure supply chain. And you can see in the left part of this chart, if you compare leaders, which is less than 10% of the market, with respect to, let's say, the 50th percentile, so the average players, you see that they have less than a half of the time to reconfigure value chains, which is even split in two portions, so the red portions and the gray portion, which is respectively the time to sense the change, so time to understand that something was changing, and let's say the demand side variation, okay, and the time to adapt the supply chain to the new situation. So these two qualifiers, so to say, are what are reported as the must-haves to compete in the table on the right of this chart. In order to understand what can be a structural solution for supply chain management. So if you go top to bottom in this right portion of the chart, you see that the key capabilities to have a resilient supply chain are respectively to reduce time to sense the change, more visibility, a capability in between to develop scenario analysis, and a supply side which is reactive and flexible. So, and now there is the link with what demand-driven is. So if you look at this definition, which dates back to 2003, when Carol Tuck, she wasn't even at the demand-driven institute at that time, but she produced this kind of sentence saying that the demand-driven is not a magic thing. It's a sensing changing customer demand, adapting planning and production while pulling from suppliers all in real time. So I think that at that time, not all the pieces of the demand-driven adaptive enterprise were, how can I say, with the level of definition we have today, okay? It was for sure a new concept in the market, and it was an idea, let's say a direction for improvement, okay? And we do believe that if this was important at those time, this will be a crucial and key capability also for the future. What are the traditional management for supply chain planning? They were still there before COVID, and will be even more important with the COVID outbreak. So I think those are, I mean, just to name three characteristics and the three aspects why traditional supply chain planning fails or tend to be less effective than required, is that first, we link supply order generation with forecast in traditional supply chain management. So in the top left, you have lead time that are not allowing me to wait for a customer order to respond, because our customer tolerance time is lower than my cumulative lead time in the value chain. And this is the logic of traditional MRP. Says, okay, since I am not able to wait, because in this particular market segment, I need to have a make-to-stock strategy, or an assembly-to-order strategy, or even a make-to-order strategy. So as long as it is not purchase-to-order strategy, I cannot wait the full cumulative lead time to respond to my client. And this is something that dictates the market. I cannot do anything. But the only tool I'm given with is MRP, which wants a demand side to run its explosion of setting and netting approach. As a result of that, I use forecast. I feed my MRP with forecast, and I originate supply order releases. And then when the time comes and the horizon of decisions approach, then I sense a forecast error, which is normal, because forecast is always wrong. That's the first golden rule of forecast. And at that time, I try to have a short-term rescheduling and firefighting. And this is increasing nervousness in the value chain. And this is also increasing lead time sometimes, because I do schedule break-ins, I change plans to my suppliers, and so the next time they are asked to provide me with a new lead time, they will be giving me an even higher purchase lead time for the parts I'm purchasing from them. And so this is originating even longer lead times, and it's like a loop. Okay, that's the planning loop trap as it is defined. So this is one problem we have. And this problem is a big problem in traditional VUCA world, and it will be an even bigger problem from now onwards. Another problem we are all familiar with, I won't spend much time on the bullwhip effect. I think that this is a very important portion. You also have a simulation game in the conference where you can experience yourself the effect of the bullwhip with supply chain simulation. I think this is even more effective than my words, so I will this task to my colleagues. And another important thing is that we need to invest in resilience through flexibility. And by flexibility, I also mean internal flexibility. So we cannot have let's say a coupled and tightened schedule in our operations anymore. So we need to find some kind of free slacks into my routings in order to accommodate changes, because it's impossible to survive with a too rigid system on the supply side. So those are the three big problems we are presented with, and let's see how demand-driven planning can be used as a, let's say, the blueprint for managing new generation supply chain. Okay, let's see. Here we have just three slides that are, I mean, reported for the sake of completeness. So I did not want to leave some of you without a very high-level explanation of how the DDMRP works, but I won't spend much time on that. I give for granted then that the audience here is familiar with this concept. So basically, my elevator pitch is, this is an innovative method, first point in the upper left in red. Then the two gray points are the two, let's say, mechanisms that allow DDMRP to be different from MRP. So only sales order are allowed to issue supply order release. So that's the second point. And the third point is, in order for the second point to be true, we need to prepare our value chain by filling up some of the decoupling buffers that we will be setting in the step 1, we will be sizing in step 2 and 3, and we will be using in step 4 and 5, which is the daily planning and execution mechanism. Lean is a philosophy which is included in the framework, together with traditional MRP and ERP. So this is also an important thing, because we managed to bring the pull concept, which is originated from Lean, within the system, together with a constant reconfiguration of the system through exception management and Six Sigma concepts, and also scheduling, I would say, scheduling tools which originated from the management of the flow, which is embedded in theory of constraints. So those aspects are making 95% of what the DDMRP is, and 5% is innovation. And within the innovation, we have the differences that allow us to have a more compelling framework to manage VUCA plus environments. As a last point, I mean, there are the proven results. I think that in this conference you will be presented with additional good results from the application if you need further confirmation that this works. And I think this is what is driving the movement. So it's a result-based movement. Okay. Again, this slide is saying you what happens at step 1, and this is an yearly refresh of or quarterly refresh, or where to put the buffers. Let's say monthly or weekly calculation of the buffers and reconfiguration, which is step 2 and 3. Where I embed in step 3 the effects of forward visibility within my buffer shaping. And step 4 and 5 are the daily planning, step 4 and 5 execution. I think you have a lot of session to go in these details, and I won't spend time on that. One thing which I believe is important, though, is the ability to use the DDMRP as an overarching supply chain coordination layer, and I would say orchestration layer. So the span of application of the DDMRP goes beyond a company MRP, and we also have seen situations where you manage to synchronize multiple MRP and DRPs together into a unique orchestration layer, which is able to concurrently manage priorities across value chain. So I think this is a very important aspect of the DDMRP. The very first implementation we did was in a company, so we didn't experience this beauty at the beginning of our journey. But the more we have implemented the DDMRP into more complex environments and multinationals, we saw situations where kind of imagine a tractor production line. You have the assembly plant, and you may have like a key tier 1 producing transmission, axles, and the cabin. This is a key tier 1. It's the same company, but they were running 2 separate MRPs. So they were in a kind of transactional relationship where everybody was running its own MRP independently, and bullwhip effect was transferred throughout the value chain, even in supply chain partners belonging to the same company. And the same applies when you have a distribution network coupled with a production. So the DDMRP's beauty is the ability of having a unique orchestration layer, and web-based, cloud-based solutions such as AirPlus and the DDTech suite in general is allowing you to have this kind of management across the value chain. I think this is a characteristic very important. Okay, let's see more in general, after some technical aspects that I went through, how the 3 paradigms and problems we are facing in traditional value chain have found a solution with the DDMRP. So let's start with this first planning loop type cycle that I have presented. So as you can remember, the main weak point in the supply chain planning, traditional supply chain planning, is the arrow going from forecast to supply order release. Through MPS and MRP, we feed the supply order release process directly with forecasts. There is a confirmed sales order plus forecast, but the forecasts are activating the supply order release. In the right part of the chart, you have the DDMRP approach, more in general, the demand-driven planning approach. So we start with lead time, which is following the same rules as on the left part of the chart. So customers are not willing to wait my cumulative lead time to get their parts. And because of that, through step 1, we decide where to position our buffers. And through step 2, we decide how to size them. So this is the first thing that changes. Second thing that changes is that the forecast or history, sometimes history, if forecasts are not good, but if forecasts are good, let's say forecast, through step 2 and 3 are used to shape buffers. But this is let's say a weak relationship. This is not an activation of supply order release. It's just a resetting. So it's a preparation signal that I need to either increase my buffers or decrease my buffers. Okay. All the forward-looking visibility needs to be infused in the buffers without disturbing supply order generation process. Because supply order generation is triggered by actual demand, sales order, which will be exploded by the DMRP process through the couple explosion and buffers. So buffers will be the key pivotal nodes where the decisions of supply order release will be taken. And these orders, which are now relevant because they are supply orders relevant to produce something my customer is willing to buy, will be transferred to production. Production also needs protection. And the protection is expressed through time buffers and capacity buffers that need to be managed by the daily planning and execution process. As an effect of that, you have a stabilization of lead times. And this stabilization of lead times is activating a positive loop now that I'm able to reduce little by little my cumulative lead times wherever possible, because those are the new key vital aspects of supply chain management, and those are the key vital key performance indicator of how my planning process is going. And this is kept together by the tactical improvement loop, which we name demand-driven sales and operation planning. So I found this as a kind of the management view, that the business leader understands this. So I think that it is difficult to express the concept by means of a lot of slides. It is very powerful to address our business leaders on how the DMRP works differently through this picture. I think this is very powerful. As an addition, we have put buffers, and buffers by definition are able to dampen variability. And this variability absorption by a buffer is one of the key at step 4 and 5 to stabilize my production, together with the ability of working with the couple schedules. Now you have like routings on the left where you have everything is coupled. If something changed, so the forecast and the real demand are different by the time a demand comes. So these faces with a coupled schedule in the production. That's the left portion of the chart. With the DMRP and more in general, with these flow protection mechanisms, which are time buffers, stock buffers, and capacity buffers, now you are able to define first the couple schedules, because every portion of the routing is responsible to feed one decoupling point. And the decoupling point doesn't need to respect perfectly due dates, because there is always a free slack. So the order priority signal will allow me to anticipate one supply order which is more urgent than another, because I'm protected by some material. And also time buffers are able to further protect the flow at bottlenecks and control points, wherever this is needed. As an effect of that, the planners are presented with a feasible plan anytime. So I think this is an additional improvement. Now, as a last part, for the last 5-10 minutes, I want to, as promised at the beginning of this session, I wanted to bring you the result of a company case. This is a case at the Hyvar company. This is an Italian company. That's a typical Italian company. So it produces heating and plumbing systems. They work with brass. They have a very verticalized value chain, high range of materials, and they were the first implementation in Italy for DDMRP. We managed to introduce the DDMRP in, we went live at March 19, okay? The goal of the company was to improve service level performance, which was very poor. It was 63%, 60-something% on time in full delivery performance. And this was, of course, impeding their business to grow, okay? They were growing because the product, made in Italy product, was very well received by the market, high quality, at the right price. So it was a very good product, but service level performance was not as good as they would have liked. And they set a target at 80-something%, and we were able to improve the service level performance to more than 90%. It is 93-94%. Okay, and this is even higher now. Okay, and we managed to do that with less stock than the beginning. So, and we have right-sized basically the stock. Of course, they had to survive with some slow movers, which were originated in the past. And as you are all familiar with the concept of slow mover, they are very slow to be consumed, and so it takes time to move the stock further down. Okay, but they are managing to further improve in this direction, and more importantly, they are not generating new slow movers anymore. So that's crucial now. As a result of that, instead of moving in the let's say traditional cost performance frontier, where in order to improve service level performance you need to invest in stock, they have been able to switch their operations into a new cost performance frontier, which is definitely better. But have a look at the date. That's February 20, okay? And then the COVID came. So of course, they were experiencing process stability throughout the DDMRP implementation. This has originated a lot of benefits in the production, because they were able to properly fill the strategic buffers by managing less emergency and less stockouts. And if you look at the right top right chart, we have charted the coefficient of variation of the order size. In the red, you have the coefficient of variation span of the orders for internally buffered position at April 2020, so system fully live with the DDMRP. And we have compared with this very same data for the very same positions 1 year earlier, so before the DDMRP launch. So as you can see, the span of the order size for buffered position dramatically reduced. And this is because instead of having a push approach, which is traditionally the MRP ones, they moved towards the pull approach. Okay, all these are signals of process stability, and through process stability, they managed to improve their overall performances, as I shown in the previous chart. And as I said, they also have implemented the demand-driven S&OP process. During December, in the S&OP, they were already faced by, let's say, some signals of material shortages in some of the Far East suppliers for some components, and they managed to address the problem by readjusting some buffers, and they took some countermeasures. And they also have experienced one dramatic increase in demand in the beginning of January last year. And this led a little bit to service level drop. So, and then the COVID came. So it was a kind of a nightmare moment where everybody was looking at their schedules in order to decide what to do, and a lot of scarcity management decisions were done at this time. All my clients were calling me, asking what to do. And no surprise, we had the same discussion with Paolo Bertolotti and Daniele Serlini. They are the project sponsor, CEO and CEO at Iver, that's Paolo, and the project manager, now manufacturing manager of Iver, Daniele. As a matter of fact, the availability of materials in the buffer helped them to survive the crisis. So they have experienced some service level drop, up to 75% on time in full, which was below their usual performance, but they were able in 3 months to go back at 90+% performance. And as a result of this capability of recovering from crisis, they managed to have an increase in their sales, because when the market experiences shortages of material, consumption of the final customers is redirected towards the material where there is availability. So that's a market rule. If you have this available at the right reaction time, then you get market share. And a high benefit came by not relying on forecast and by not transferring bullwhip effect throughout the value chain. So I think this is a kind of a lesson learned I wanted to share in order to close the loop with the original sentence. So having resilience is something that you need to do from a strategic choice and moving towards a flow-based supply chain planning. And then when there is disruption, you have all the weapons to answer. Answer at best. You cannot do perfect, but you can refigure your value chain quickly. The last bit of information, the update on our practice. As I said at the early beginning, we started in 2017 with this, and we had this first client case in 2018. As of now, we have more than 20 projects with more than 100 professionals trained in the DDMRP, and 14 countries with the DDMRP capabilities. You see all the flags, and more countries that are willing to join our community. They know what the DDMRP is, are able to manage a kind of the project inception, and there is a delivery center for the DDMRP which is able to support every request from the market. I'm so proud we got to this level, and together with Marianna, she's our practice driver, and she is helping all of our country leaders to be available with this offering out in the market. So I think this is very good. And by the way, if you have any question on that, either on the perspective or on the company case where Marianna was the project manager, we are here to answer any queries you may have. On my side, I thank you all for the attention today, and I'm available to interact with you. Thank you very much.
We have questions on the sidebar here. So first question is, how do you quantify that the company has sensed and responded to changes in demand? How do you quantify that? Tricky question.
This is relative to the this is related to the capability of properly representing the level of change which is required in the, let's say, the new updates of forecast. Okay, this was coming from a questionnaire that colleagues put together and say how accurate was your result of reforecasting after the let's say the outbreak. This was related to the a retrospective analysis of what was done in 2008, 2009.
Okay. Another question was from Rita. Why do you think the US has not widely adopted the methodology yet?
Ooh, I mean, I think there are more educated person in this conference to answer this question, but I can give you my perspective. Okay, I think that the company size. I mean, the size a company must have in order to embrace this change at the beginning. If it is too big, that may be a problem. Okay, so that I can tell you by experience. Starting with big corporations and this kind of change is always difficult. Whilst with medium-sized corporate companies is let's say a bit easier. For many reasons. So I think this is one reason. I know, for instance, in Italy, let's compare Italy and Germany, for instance, just to give you a perspective. In Italy, we have half, say not exactly half, but 30% less of the industrial production with respect to Germany, but twice as much as companies. So it means that the company size is smaller. So in mid-sized companies, it's easier to make this mental shift happen. I'm not familiar directly, by direct experience, with the average company size in the US, but I think this could be a driver. Other than that, I also know that it depends on the market acceptance of a new concept itself. So, but I mean, I think that I'm too far from the US to properly answer this. So I would be more curious to redirect these questions to either Carol or Chad if they are in this call, or even Eric. So let's leave this to them.
Okay, and I think we'll hear some great story of implementations in America as well later on this conference.
Yes. But I mean, for what I know, I can tell you that in the last year, I've heard of a lot of things happening in the US with respect to demand-driven. Okay, the attention level on these topics grew. At least this is the perspective I have.
I will maybe hand it over to Mariana, who joined us for the balance of the questions.
Yes, please.
Yes, so I see that there is a question about how did you cite your buffer to manage vendor variability during the COVID and risk of not delivering component on time?
This is yours, perfect.
Okay, so I will answer to this question. So there were two cases, the one with the ASEAN supplier, and as Ivan said during the presentation, we faced a risk of potential stock out that we discussed during the demand-driven S&OP in December in IVAR. And what we did, we started to do some expediting action on the open orders, and we increased the variability factor for these components. And in December, we know that in February there is a long holiday time in Asia, so we started in December to ask for orders anticipations, and this for the Asian suppliers. For the local suppliers in Italy, we set, as Ivan said, the objective of the project was to really increase the service level. So we set the buffer and the variability factor in a conservative way. And of course, this helped to protect the variability during the COVID time, and but also when we reviewed all the parameters, we increased also the variability factor for the key components and the key suppliers in Italy. And of course, apart from modifying the parameters, we started to increase also the collaborations and the stock visibility along the supply side. So hope that this answered the question. See another one. Even as Ivan reduced the batch size, did they experience any significant degradation in operations efficiency? Yes, it's true. Ivan decreased the manufacturing batch size. So of course, they had more number of setups, but overall, in terms of operations efficiency, what we can say is that they use their capacity for delivering real sales order, not to build stock, and they also use all the logistics internal movement of the warehouse for what was really needed for delivery for the client. So overall, looking to the overall operations efficiency, I don't think that there was a degradation.
No, let me elaborate a bit this. So if you see in this chart in the right part, this is the coefficient of variation of order sizes, which is not meaning that they reduce the order size. They have created, let's say, rules where the order sizes were more stable, and as an effect of that, the lead times were more consistent. And with these more consistent lead times, they have sized the buffers downstream in the value chain. So the buffer acted in order to protect. As an effect of that, the need for expediting decreased. Whilst previously they were running big batch sizes, but sometimes small batch size in order to complete some of the urgent order, incurring in, let's say, at the end, more changeovers. Okay, so the efficiency overall increased slightly in the overall production, but not because they wanted to increase OEE, but because they wanted to protect the flow, and the capacity was sized in order to allow the, let's say, nominal number of changeover in order to produce every part, every given interval. They have classified this every given interval rule according to run and repeat strangers, and according to this they have set the internal manufacturing lead times. And I think that overall this caused an increase in efficiency and an increase in stability. I think this can maybe help to answer the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivan and Marina, for this conference. I think we have no other question.